proceedings across to the House of Commons. A statement
so
is being delivered
with a
on the earlier gender recognition
is a man for the purposes of the Act. The case was appealed to the Supreme Court, and last week the court ruled that sex in the Equality Act means biological sex. This means that a person will be considered as their biological sex for the purposes of the Equality Act, regardless of whether or not they have a gender recognition certificate. I know that the women who brought this challenge have not always been treated with the respect that they deserve. And this government believes in freedom of speech, and we believe in the fundamental right to protest. But in no way does that extend to criminal damage. There can be no excuse for defaced statues of feminist icons, no excuse for threats, no excuse for harassment. Madam Deputy Speaker, such acts seek to drag down the debate away from common sense, away from the sensible view held by the majority of the British public that women need single-sex spaces, that those spaces should be protected, and that you can protect those spaces while treating trans people with respect as well. So the certainty that this judgment brings is welcome. And now, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is time to move forward. There's now a need to ensure that this ruling is clear across a range of settings, from healthcare and prisons to sport and single-sex support groups. The Equality and Human Rights Commission, as Britain's equality regulator, is working quickly to issue an updated statutory code of practice to reflect this judgment, and I look forward to reviewing that code of practice in due course. And Madam Deputy Speaker, alongside these updates, our work to protect single-sex spaces across society continues in earnest. Because for far too long, under the Conservative government, single-sex spaces were anything but. And nowhere is that clearer than in our hospitals. Year after year, the party opposite pledged to close mixed-sex wards, and yet year after year, their use not only persisted, it grew massively. And year after year, often in their most vulnerable moments, women were denied the privacy and the dignity that they deserved. Time after time, Conservative ministers, including the now Leader of the Opposition, came to this House and toured television studios telling the public that they were protecting single-sex spaces in our hospitals. Madam Deputy Speaker, the truth was very, very different. Because as last year's data tells us, the use of mixed-sex wards rose by over 2,200%, 2,200% in 10 years under the last Tory government. There is no better example of this, of rhetoric divorced from reality, of a party playing politics with the safety of women, and we will never let them forget it. Madam Deputy Speaker, by contrast, this government will protect women's wards, and NHS England will soon publish guidance on how trans patients should be accommodated in clinical settings, and we will end the practice of mixed-sex wards once and for all. It is not just in our NHS that we will act on behalf of women. In prisons, we will continue to protect women's safety with single-sex accommodation. In women's sport, I've always backed integrity and fairness. Biology matters for competitive sport, and sporting bodies have issued rules to reflect this. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, in our prisons, in our hospitals, in sport, in a whole host of other spaces, what was true before the ruling remains true after the ruling. This government protects safe spaces for women under the Equality Act 2010. And for too many years, we've seen the heat dialed up on this debate by the party opposite with no real action to protect women's spaces. While the use of mixed-sex wards increased under their watch, while an epidemic of violence against women and girls spread across the country, while women's health was neglected, this Labour government will deliver for women through our plan for change, driving down waiting lists month after month, tackling misogyny throughout society, and once and for all, delivering justice for survivors of violence against women and girls. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know as well that many trans people will be worried in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling. So I want to provide reassurance here and now that trans people will continue to be protected. We will deliver a full trans-inclusive ban on conversion practices. We will work to equalise all existing strands of hate crime, and we will review adult gender identity services so that all trans people get the high-quality care that they deserve. The laws to protect trans people from discrimination and harassment will remain in place, and trans people will still be protected on the basis of gender reassignment, a protected characteristic written into Labour's Equality Act. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government will offer trans people the dignity that too often they were denied by the party opposite. Too often, a convenient punch bag. Too often, the butt of jokes made in this place by the party opposite, culminating rather shamefully in the previous Prime Minister standing at this dispatch box trying to score cheap laughs from his backbenchers at the expense of vulnerable people. By contrast, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is clear. Trans people deserve safety, they deserve opportunity, and they deserve respect. Madam Deputy Speaker, this verdict is about clarity and coherence in the eyes of the law. But the Supreme Court judges delivered along with that verdict a vital reminder. This isn't about the triumph of one group at the expense of another. It's not about winners or losers. It's not about us or them. And that is the message that I want to reinforce here today in this House. Everyone in our society deserves dignity and respect. Those values are not and never will be a zero-sum battle. Dignity and respect for all. Those are the values that lift us up and set us free. Those are the values that define and distinguish any modern and compassionate society. And those are the values, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this government will do everything to promote and protect now and always. And I commend this statement to the House.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of her statement, even if it was mostly a shameless work of fiction. I could not believe my eyes or my ears this afternoon. In 2021, the Prime Minister said it is not right to say only women have a cervix. In 2022, he said it is the law that trans women are women. In 2023, he said, and I quote, 99% of women don't have a penis. I know what a woman is, and I always have. The people of this country know what a woman is. We didn't need the Supreme Court to tell us that, but this government did. A Labour government so desperate to jump on a bandwagon that they abandoned common sense, along with the SNP, who put rapists in women's prisons, and of course the Liberal Democrats. The Supreme Court ruling is a powerful victory for the determined women behind For Women Scotland, and for people all over the UK who know how important it is to give privacy and dignity to women and girls who need it. But it follows years of battle. Individual women took action to uphold the law at great personal cost, losing their jobs and their reputations. A few weeks ago, I met the Darlington nurses who have been forced to bring legal action after a male nurse started using their changing room. Even their union, the Royal College of Nursing, refused to represent them. Women should not have to battle the NHS or their employers through the courts. Why has it been such a battle? Because something as simple as biological reality became politicized and corrupted by activists pushing this ideology as foolish politicians cheered. Even the Secretary of State, who said that this is personal to her, stated just last year that men should access women's spaces. Whether it is female victims in our courts being forced to refer to their male sex attackers as she, or the NHS using confusing gender-neutral language, putting the health of women at risk, this is a serious matter. At every point, we have fought for women. We faced hostility from activist groups and those opposite. In 2020, when we rejected rejected Labour's calls to introduce self-ID, or in 2021, when the then Home Secretary, the member for Witham, ordered police forces to stop recording offences by trans women in female crime statistics. The current Culture Secretary said that crimes committed by men should be recorded how they wish, that those convicted of serious sexual offences should be held in jails that match their chosen gender. It was crazy then, and it is crazy now. I spent years battling abuse from Labour MPs as I fought to uphold biological sex in government, and as I blocked the SNP introducing their mad self-identity laws. I will take no lectures from them on what to do on this issue. Women and gay rights groups like the LGB Alliance were even refused stands at the Labour Party conference. The idea that they have supported this all along is for the birds. The Foreign Secretary described opponents of self-ID as dinosaurs. Labour now says that they know what a woman is and that transgender people should use services and facilities designated to their biological sex. They've never said this before. This is a U-turn, but we welcome it. Now that we have legal clarity, will the Prime Minister show some courage and do the right thing? Will he apologise to the member for Canterbury, who faced so many security concerns as she was hounded out by the Labour Party and was rebuked by the Prime Minister and many Labour MPs sitting there looking at me for stating what the Supreme Court has now ruled to be true? Will she apologise to the member for Canterbury? I doubt it. Will the Prime Minister crack down on the groups we saw defacing statues of suffragists over the weekend with the same energy he reserves for his political opponents? Or will we see more two-tier justice? Because the last time we saw Labour MPs standing next to them with no rebuke whatsoever. Will the Secretary of State ensure that the EHRC has the government's full support in its enforcement of the Code of Practice? And in particular, will she condemn those Labour ministers who described Baroness Faulkner's entirely correct position on the judgment as appalling? Madam Deputy Speaker, we need to root out gender ideology from our institutions. This government now has a serious job to do, as many organisations will still fail women. So I ask the following. As Minister for Women and Equalities, I published guidance for schools that made clear that toilets and changing rooms must be provided separately for girls and boys. She scrapped that guidance. Will she stand up to the unions and urgently publish what she now admits is the law? She also scrapped RHSE guidance to prevent schools from teaching contested gender ideology as fact. Will she now publish this guidance and remove materials that misstate the law? Will she act to stop passports and licences being issued with self-declared rather than legal sex? Will the government support our amendments to the data bill to ensure digital ID systems record biological sex accurately? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I heard the Secretary of State. She says that she is here to protect transgender people. Many of them were misled by Labour's misstatements on this issue. Some are now left very anxious. She has not provided any reassurance, and she should not use them as a shield to protect her failure. This isn't the end of the matter, but the beginning of the end. There is so much to do, and the Conservative Party, under my leadership, will be relentless in ensuring the government does the right thing.
Us blokes hate talking about a little thinning up top, and many of us settle with that balding look, but that wasn't for me, and that's why I went to Elite Hair, the world's leading hair loss clinic, and now I've had over 4,000 new hairs added to this barnet, and very soon I'm going to be rocking some brand new flowing locks, and you can too. So how does it work? Step 1, I sent the team a set of photos of my head. Step 2, I then spoke to one of the Elite Hair staff who looked through my photo submissions and worked out a treatment plan for me. Step 3, Elite Hair then organised accommodation and the treatment. I was at their state-of-the-art treatment centre in Istanbul, and their incredibly kind staff took me through the process, and before I knew it, I was in surgery. Elite Hair and their leading medical experts have specialised in pain-free treatments using the Sleep Deep method, and they really mean that. I felt incredibly relaxed the whole time, and I haven't felt any pain since. Check out Elite Hair using the link in the description. When you do, Elite Hair will provide you with a free personalised hair analysis. Then you'll join over 100,000 happy patients. Hit that link and start your hair growth journey like I did today.
We spoke at length, didn't we, last week about the Supreme Court judgment. Good, that's what I said. Common sense finally prevailing, but how embarrassing that it took the biggest court in the land to get involved to define the answer to that simple question, what is a woman? It is a little bit embarrassing that was required in the first place. But anyway, look, Bridget Phillipson, she has just been delivering a statement in the Commons, as you've just been hearing, criticising as well some of the goings-on from the protests at the weekend. Let's take a listen.
I know that the women who brought this challenge have not always been treated with the respect that they deserve. And this government believes in freedom of speech, and we believe in the fundamental right to protest. But in no way does that extend to criminal damage. There can be no excuse for defaced statues of feminist icons. Such acts seek to drag down the debate away from common sense, away from the sensible view held by the majority of the British public that women need single-sex spaces, that those spaces should be protected.
Well, that speech went on for quite a passage of time, actually. The essence of it was that many people, if you ask me, they're coming out now and saying, you know what, single-sex spaces, very important, and we've always stood for that. I won't even bore you. I could fill up my whole show with all these examples of people doing it literally the exact opposite, and they're all doing a very swift U-turn now. But anyway, Bill Rammell, your thoughts?
I wholly welcome the Supreme Court ruling. I think it's absolutely the right thing. I think for too long, extreme trans activists have bullied the system over this issue and excluded and marginalised the rights of women. So it's a very, very welcome result. However, trans people do have rights, and the job of government now is to develop guidelines as to what will happen to those trans individuals in terms of their access to toilets, to safe spaces, to hospital wards. And that's going to be a difficult process, but it's going to take time. We're going to have to be pragmatic. And it took us decades and decades and decades to get to this position with safe spaces for women being sacrosanct. It will take a bit of time to resolve those issues for trans people.
But correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I've missed something in the small print, but because I've been hearing a lot over the last few days about trans rights and so on. You know, no one's removed rights. No one's saying a trans person can't go to the toilet or can't go to a hospital ward. What rights are we talking about that people are potentially lost?
If you have transitioned and you've got a medical certificate to that effect, you are in a different category and you are arguably not going to want to go, and I'm talking about a woman transitioning to be a man, a man transitioning to be a woman, you're not going to want to go into the male toilets. That's the blunt reality of it. But for me, of paramount importance is we fought for decades for safe spaces for women. That had to be protected. That's what the Supreme Court has done. It's going to take a bit of time to resolve the issues for trans individuals.
Yeah, I was just about to say, don't get me started on the whole process of gender recognition. I am someone that does not believe that a £5 piece of paper makes you the opposite gender.
Do you know, Michelle, Theresa May, when she was Prime Minister in 2017, actually advocated self-identification without any medical intervention whatsoever. So all parties...
but that is pathetic.
Yeah, but all parties have been on the journey on this issue. I'm just...
but all parties should look in the mirror, have a serious word with themselves. I mean, if I was Keir Starmer today, he came out, everyone was waiting with bated breath to see what he had to say on the matter. I would be so embarrassed if I was a politician or the Prime Minister of this country and I had to be told by a court what a woman was. I would literally be so embarrassed that I'd fallen for the bullying tactics of activist groups. I think I would probably have to hang my head in shame and resign from public life forever. But anyway, Esther,
some people might be hoping that happens, that didn't happen. Because I have to tell you, he's got the skin of a rhino, as says Philip Bridget, who was only saying the exact opposite only days ago. They're all gaslighting the country that they did think this. They've always thought this. No, they did a massive U-turn and they were advocating the exact opposite. They did not know what biological sex was. They were going down the gender sort of rabbit hole. But it is good news. I'm glad they've agreed biologically what a woman is. I mean, he's only, 62, 63, married to a woman, got a couple of kids, but it took a court ruling to tell him what a woman was. But what I think will be interesting to see, and I agree with you, Bill, actually the practicalities, how are we going to deal with this? But actually I think there's problems within the Labour Party, what we saw with the WhatsApp, those leaked messages that people like Chris Bryant, people like Angela Eagle are wanting to get this court ruling overturned. So what is he going to do there? He might say one thing, but is he going to let his party do another thing? What are they going to do? Are they apologising to Rosie Duffield, who basically they bullied out of the Labour Party for saying what a biological woman was? So I think there's a long way to go here, and I think the Labour Party won't just be the two-tier Labour Party. I think they will now be the two-faced Labour Party. I think they'll be talking about women in public, but behind the back they're going to try and contest this ruling.
Esther, let me ask you a question. When Theresa May advocated self-identification with no medical intervention in 2017, did you oppose it?
Yeah, I actually, if you remember, resigned from her cabinet. That was over Brexit. No, because I don't, she never said it to me, and I don't actually know if I was in government at the time, but I am somebody who's very straight, and when she was taking the wrong turn, which she did on Brexit, okay. I was no longer there in cabinet. I resigned.
OK, but the point I'm making is that all parties have got histories on this issue. However,
she tried to go down that route, but lots of people did not agree with her in the Conservative Party. But what I will say is...
She was Prime Minister at the time. But look, on the issue of Chris Bryant and others, I think what they were trying to do was to get the clarity on the rights of trans people subsequent to this ruling. If it's any more than that, then Keir Starmer will have to deal with it, and knowing him, I think he will.
No, they were saying it was an appalling judgment. They said they were leaving particular sort of bitterness to Baroness Faulkner, and they were looking at what they could do. They were meeting in Parliament this week, so let's see where it goes. But I do see a lot more trouble bubbling up for Labour on this. I don't think it is all over with that statement there.
One of the points that Kemi Badenoch was making as well in Parliament just a few minutes ago, in case you missed that, she was basically talking about gender ideology, and the fact actually it's everywhere, ladies and gents, particularly when you look at schools. I'm really opposed to that. Anyone that watches this programme will know about this. Schools should be teaching biological reality. In fact, they shouldn't be getting carried away with themselves, teaching children about gender ideology. I find it so wrong, and as I've ranted to you all about before, this is in primary schools. I've been to look at primary schools for my little boy, and it's in primary schools. Honestly, really, I really don't think it is a force for good. But